We're moving, we're vibing. While we're talking, you can get your laugh on. Watch the channel of a video. Subscribe, like and follow. We are chilling with the girls, with the girls. Girls, with the girls, chilling with the girls.
Woohoo! All right. All right. We are chilling with the girls. Welcome. Another episode. Chilling with the girls. Okay, so we have with us tonight as our guest. Her name is Cassaundra Wilkins-Mar'shall, and she is a licensed social worker in the District of Columbia. And she received her master's degree in social work from Harvard University. And she has worked in the fields of mental and child welfare and is currently an investigative social worker for the DC Child and Family Services Agency, where she has worked for 16 years.
Wow, that's great.
I know, right? 16 years. And one thing, she's experienced providing trauma therapy, mental health counseling, and substance abuse counseling. Wow. So she is with us today, and we're going to have this conversation, and I pray that it helps somebody out there, some of those viewers out there, that her story will help someone else. Okay. So welcome, Cassaundra.
Yes.
So
welcome.
How are you tonight? Yes. How are you doing tonight?
Yes, I'm good. Thank you. Thank you so much for being here this evening. I do appreciate the invitation. Yes. And it certainly is an honor to be before you guys, chilling with the girls. And so I've seen you guys online streaming, a bit. And so I'm just honored. I had no idea that I would one day be sitting on this awesome platform.
Wow.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
So,
wow.
Yeah.
So
I knew you all were talented. And so
I'm sorry, go ahead. What were you saying?
No, I said I always knew that you all were talented. And so this is the avenue. So I'm just extremely honored. I'm very impressed. And I'm just so very, very, very fortunate to be with you guys, especially with the one and only Mary Farmer.
Come on now, right?
Honored to be in her presence. I mean, I've kind of looked up to her and idolized her, all my young life. So yeah, and she's still young and beautiful, and I'm just just honored, so honored to be with you. So thank you so much.
Oh, thank you.
Shout out to Mom. Go ahead.
Okay. So how long have you been doing social work? How long have you been working in this field?
Okay, so I've been in the field of social work for several years. And so when you look at social work, a lot of times, people, misunderstand exactly what social work is. So I've been doing that. I want to say almost 30 years. I've been in the field of social work. And I would say in the helping field for almost 30 years. However, but as a licensed professional social work, I've been doing that for, I would say, about almost 20 years.
Okay.
So even though I've been in the field of social work, I'm now more what you would consider a professional licensed social work by the government in order to be able to practice in that field. Prior to that, you would consider that a bachelor's level social worker, and that wasn't licensed but was still performing these services and counseling, but not as a licensed professional, having to work under someone else who was licensed. And so, but now as a licensed social worker, if you say how long have I been a social worker, when you say that, I consider that in a professional stance. And so professionally, I've been a social worker for almost 20 years.
Okay.
Yes.
Right. Okay. So so I just heard you say that a lot of people don't know what social work is. Can you explain that to us? What is social work?
Okay, yeah, social work is sort of like that field. People who have that feeling and that calling to help others, and that's pretty much what that field is. That person that has that big heart, and we all have it, but there's some individuals who want to use that big heart to help other people professionally.
Oh,
And so I would say that's what social work is being able to help the indigent, is being able to help those who are struggling, those who are traumatized, those who have experienced crisis, and wanting to do that, but wanting to be able to operate professionally and adhere to the laws of the state and the government, and acknowledging the ethics that we use, because the social worker, they have to be committed to ethics, and making sure that you protect your client's privacy. And so that's what social work is. And you can find us pretty much in many field and genres. It's not just in many people have the understanding that we're in therapy, or that we're in the schools as school social workers, or we're in the hospitals. That's where a lot of times you will see us. But we're also in the child welfare field, in child protective services. We're also in adoptive services, and helping those traumatized children who don't have homes find long-term permanent homes. You also have social workers who work in the substance abuse field, providing support and assistance and services to those. And you can find social workers on, I would say, on a administrative level. In a business manner, people who are administrators, who are leaders, who are supervisors, who really don't have that face-to-face interaction with clients, but they're overseeing the day-to-day duty and job of the field, or those who are actually in the field. You can find social workers as lobbyists on Capitol Hill. You can find, we're pretty much everywhere.
Wow,
we're there fighting for laws. We're there making sure that there are changes. We're there making sure that that the social services fields that meet the needs of those who need a safety net. But we're not, always interacting with the clients. And so social work is everything. But most people only consider it as maybe a clinical therapist or a counselor, or a foster care social worker. When you say social worker, you're thinking of foster care, or something like child welfare.
Okay.
So,
right.
Yeah, but I would say it's the heart of the nation. It's those people who have some of the biggest hearts that will help others, and you would do whatever it takes. It just really it goes beyond the 9 to 5, because you're not doing it for the money, even though the field that sometimes the money is really good, but you're not doing that because regardless of what you do, it's really not enough to pay a social worker, because they're giving their all, and sometimes they put themselves in harm's way just to be able to help somebody. And so I've kind of experienced that. So they're really walking into, sometimes you never know what you're walking into as a social worker. You're walking into a hazard or a war zone. And so so it's a it's a field. It doesn't get a lot of attention, but we are there to help the broken. I mean, anytime you need us, we are there. We're there for you, and it's wholeheartedly. We're really committed.
Well, I have a question, Cassaundra, because the title of our show is Overcoming Trauma and Abuse.
Yes.
So all of your cases traumatic and have abuse cases, or all of them like that?
So I would say many of them are, deal with a lot of trauma, many of them. And so when you are talking about trauma, because trauma can be seen in so many different avenues. Sometimes what's traumatic to me is not traumatic to you. It depends on how you function, because sometimes people can experience the same trauma that you experience, but because you're more resilient, it does not impact you the same way it would someone else. Because you're resilient, you're able to meet your baseline, you're able to pick yourself up, you sometimes have a support system, and so you're not really traumatized by it. And so, but yeah, trauma, a lot of people have experienced trauma, a lot of people have experienced crisis. But but a lot of, the cases that I've experienced have dealt with trauma. I've worked in pretty much,
So what would you consider as a traumatic case or situation? How can you diagnose that as traumatic?
Okay. There's so many. I mean, and I can think of, like, for instance, in child welfare, just that's where I am now. I recall a case where there was a child, and the child was unable to reside with their parents, and a lot of times it involved domestic violence. So domestic violence is very traumatic, and so as a result of that trauma, that child ended up losing both of their parents.
Wow.
So we have a parent where the father ended up killing the baby's mother, and after killing the baby's mother, he was wanted and chased by the police. And as the police were, going to take him in, he had a gun, but it wasn't his intention to shoot anyone. They call it death by police. He wanted the police to kill him. And so that same day, that baby, that little child, ended up being traumatized, losing both of their parents. And so, I mean, it's trauma.
That is traumatic. Yeah.
It's very, very traumatic.
Yeah.
And so, it's it's really, a lot. And if you look at, every field, I mean, even like because I've worked with abused elderly at one point. And so I remember, clients who had lived on their own, had their own homes, and had grown in their own houses. And after getting up to age, not able to take care of their own, finances and daily living and things like that of themselves, they began to trust other people, and they became the victim of predatory lending. And as a result of predatory lending, they ended up losing all of their estate, their home, their house. And 80 years old, they're homeless and they're out on the street because someone began to take advantage of them and stole their house right from under their nose.
Wow.
And I have experienced that, and just seeing, I'll never forget, elderly woman, is tall, dark, elderly, and had the sweetest spirit. And she could hardly make it up the steps. She had lost everything. And when she got to the top of the step, she was so relieved to finally be able to have a place to lay her head, because she had lost everything.
Wow.
Everything. Her house, her home, didn't have any, children, and if everything was stolen from right under her nose.
Wow.
And there's no protection against that. It seemed like it should be some kind of protection against that.
Yeah, there are laws and there are protections. And so I recall that this was back in the early 2000s, and so there are laws now to stop that predatory lending. But I would say, you just have to be able to trust someone. And elderly people, just kind of make sure that you get your papers and your documents in order, before you get to the age when you can't do anything, before someone really does begin to take advantage.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's just a lot, a lot of sad stories, that I, personally have faced, and of course, when in working in foster care for years and adoption for years, working with children and having those kids removed from those homes, and as a a social worker, having those children become attached to me and looking at me as if I'm their mommy, because
Right.
they see me more than they would see their mom.
Mhm.
But being able to assess them and then stand before the court to testify that these children are traumatized. They're experiencing so much trauma as a result of not having both of their parents, because
Mhm.
one parent is locked up and incarcerated, and then the other parent is unfortunately strung out on drugs and cannot parent the other child, and then there are no resources in the family, so they just have to come into foster care.
Yeah.
And so I will never recall just having to it's traumatic. I will never recall just having to remove 3 beautiful children as a result of that situation that they were in. And all 3 kids cried all night long.
Wow.
And I took them to the home, and I said, I can't just drop them off and leave them.
Wow,
Because
Cassaundra.
they already spent all day with me.
Yeah.
I stayed in that house for hours, until the last one stopped crying, and I held them in my arms just to let them know that it was going to be okay.
Wow.
That was, I'm telling you, it was just traumatic. These kids were of age. I would say they were 5, 6, and 4, 5, and 6, and so they had they knew their parents. They knew who their parents were.
Yeah.
They had witnessed their father being arrested and incarcerated. They had witnessed their father shoot someone.
Ooh.
And just to see all of that trauma, and to see I'm talking about gorgeous, beautiful, adorable little kids.
Yeah.
And they cried, and they cried, and they cried, and they cried. They cried. They would not let me go.
Wow.
They cried all night long, and I sat there, with them.
Yeah.
I even, thinking I have my own daughter at home that I have to get to. But
Right.
my daughter was secure.
Yeah.
She had a resource. She had her family. She had her grandmother. And so I knew that she was in good hands, but I just could not leave these babies.
Wow.
And I worked with that family, I would say, for almost a year, with those kids for almost a year.
Wow.
And it was just the most traumatic experience ever. It just kind of, just grips my heart.
Absolutely.
And and then just one being their social worker, having to make an assessment, and then to write the report to let the court know we need to help stabilize these children as soon as possible.
Yeah.
They are so traumatized. And because now we do live in a society where if you're incarcerated, you do have a right to see your children.
Okay.
And so I will never recall, we have support workers who assist the social workers, but the support workers weren't available at that time to take the children to the jail. And I will never recall taking all 3 of these kids to the jail to see their father. And just the mere fact that each and every one of them cried just going through the metal detector.
Wow.
It was so traumatic. So traumatic. It's amazing. And so that's why we tell our children, and sometimes our own kids, they do not realize how good they have it.
Yeah.
They don't realize it. Just imagine, going to the jail on a weekly basis to see your mom or to see your dad, and being traumatized because the noise from the metal detector is so loud that it's scaring you. And I will never recall, it took us maybe an hour or an hour and a half just to pass through the metal detector to get upstairs.
Wow.
An hour and a half. Because go through a metal detector, you got to take your boots off. You got to anything go off, you got to take the belt off.
That's traumatic for them,
And the children are just crying and screaming, and we just don't know. And these kids were traumatized.
Yeah.
That's what you call trauma. And a lot of people think that the only trauma that a child experiences is physical abuse. There's emotional trauma. Emotional trauma of not having your parents, or the emotional trauma.
And Cassaundra, when they're separated. sometimes they can't stay together when you, like they all in different
People don't want all of them, or
Yeah.
they can't accommodate
That's
them all.
Yeah.
I have a couple. I have to come and jump in here. First of all, Jackie Gray is on here. She was like, "Hey, I'm here." And our cousin Tony Graham. But I also have Gwendolyn Simmons has a question for you, Cassaundra. Do social workers experience trauma from the service they provide?
Oh, most definitely. We call it in social work vicarious trauma. And vicarious trauma is when you are not in, when you're an indirect witness or victim of the trauma. Because like you say, all of this trauma that the kids or the clients or the mothers or anybody, the clients, your client that you're meeting with in therapy, and you're listening to that on a daily basis, and all you're listening to is trauma. After a while, you begin to experience that same trauma.
Wow.
And it's vicarious trauma. And so that's why we tell anyone that's in the helping field, you have to take time out on yourself.
Yeah.
You have to have me time. You have to take a day off or a mental health day.
Yeah.
And you have to be able to even explain to your employer, okay, this is just, it's really affecting me. I need time to process this.
Yeah.
And that's why, this field is so important, because like we said, we have social workers on the administrative level, and having a good supervisor of that social worker to provide clinical supervision is extremely helpful, because it helps you to process what you've experienced through that client. So you're not taking it on, and that you're not being burnt out as a result.
So are there counselors for the social workers?
There are counselors and social workers. Many of the social workers will tell you that they have to receive their own counseling.
Right.
They will tell you. And so, and even at, within the government, in any job, you have the EAP. So if you have an employer, you utilize your EAP at all times. And so it is nothing to be ashamed about. You don't have to be embarrassed. It's there to help you, and you have to utilize that service.
Right.
You have to be able to utilize that, because after a while, it's going to start impacting your functioning, your ability to function professionally, and it may start to impact you at home, and so, or in your social life. And so sometimes you have to tell yourself, okay, I need counseling, and if I don't get the counseling, I need to be able to better cope and develop my own coping skills. So
be honest with yourself.
Well, I have a question. What about social workers who have been traumatized themselves? Do you think they make the best ones to work with people?
Because of empathy.
Oh, definitely. Yes. So what you will see is, and so what we've studied, what a lot of social workers have studied in school, if you take a poll of some social workers, not all, but they will tell you that they have experienced some type of trauma or crisis themselves.
Wow.
And that's why sometimes they get into this field to be able to help others, because they were able to overcome. And so, I mean, it's a given. And because we have learned how to cope, and because we're healthy enough, and we can sometimes it's called disclosure. And many times I've talked to my own clients, and even if I feel that the parent has been wrong, or the parent has been neglectful, I mean, I will tell them if there's something that I can relate to, something that they're going through with their children, I have to open up. I have to be able to disclose of my own pain and my own experience and what I had to go through to overcome. It's not a full disclosure, but you're letting that client know I've been there.
Okay.
And if you can use me as an example. And so I've met, I have seen so many people just as a result of my own personal trauma, because I have experienced some trauma in my life, my own personal trauma, and being able to share with them. I understand. I have been in a similar situation, maybe not exactly what you have experienced, but I overcame. I overcame, and here I am. And now I'm here on the other side, and I'm able to help you.
Mhm.
And so that's how residual it is. And so social workers have become empowered, and we empower other people.
And the people want to know that you can relate to them. Like
Exactly.
They want to know. You totally understand, because a lot of people, it's hard to help them. Like, how can you help me if you've never been through this? So you were like, no, I can relate to you. You know.
Right.
I have another question. What are the signs of domestic abuse? Like when you, and this is for like people out there in virtual land, if they're teachers, if neighbors, like what are the signs of domestic abuse for in women, men, and children?
Of domestic abuse, are you talking about domestic violence?
Yes.
Okay. Interpartner violence. I want to make sure I'm understanding. Okay, the signs, sometimes the signs are very clear. But then when you have a woman who has suffered domestic violence, a lot of times they're not comfortable with sharing because they've been victimized. And a lot of times in domestic violence, we only think of abuse as physical. But if you look at the cycle of domestic violence, it doesn't always start off physical.
Right.
Sometimes it will start off as mental abuse, psychological abuse.
Yeah.
Being degraded, being called names, being told that and being just talked about. And so it's just so funny, in speaking of the domestic abuse and domestic violence, I'm a survivor of domestic violence. That was my own trauma. That's something that I experienced. I am a witness, of that. And so and sometimes I can't relate. I know what it feels like to be called by your spouse and to be said that you're trash.
Wow.
And that you're trash and you're never going to be anything. I know what it feels like to be hit, to have a black eye. I know what it feels like to be so ashamed that you can't show your face and you can't talk about it. You can't share anyone because you think that you can't share it with anybody because you think that they're going to look down on you, especially even in the church, because in the church, domestic violence is still a stigma because people think that it doesn't exist in the church because everybody's supposed to be saved and born again and so sanctified, but honestly, they're not. Behind closed doors, they're not. And so you become ashamed. And so, and a lot of the first signs is that low self-esteem. Can't hold their head down. Then they're isolated. They're always by themselves. They don't want to talk to anyone because they feel like if they talk to somebody, they may say something. And if they say something, it may get back to the abuser, and then that's going to re-escalate the abuse.
Right.
In the home. It's going to cause more problems. And then some of the other signs is, they pulled away from their family. Because most of the time the abuser knows that the support system is in the family. So what they have to do is they have to pull you away from the family, tell them, okay, you can't talk to this person. You can't go out with that person. They have to call at a certain time or they can't come over. And so those are the signs. Why is she so secluded? She must be so stuck up. It's not about being secluded and stuck up. Sometimes sometimes we judge so much that we really haven't taken the time to really think about what really is going on.
Wow.
What really is going on? Why? Why?
Sandra, can someone report an abuse without giving their name, like anonymously?
Oh, definitely.
Hotline? Okay. That was
definitely. And yes, and so they can contact the hotline. Every state has a child protective services hotline. Every state has adult protective services hotline. But I do want to say that whenever it comes to domestic violence and there are children in the home, it becomes a child welfare problem. It has to be, and it should be reported to Child Protective Services. And so nowadays, what you will see is that police officers, if they walk into a home and they get a call about domestic violence, and there are children in that home, they have to contact the Child Protective Services hotline. And the reason why is because so many children are being traumatized by domestic violence.
Yeah.
Get traumatized by what they witnessed in the household.
Yeah.
And they're going to school, and the signs in the children is also they shut down, they've isolated themselves, or they're acting out. They have behavioral issues.
Right.
They're fighting everybody. Why? Because that's all they see in the household.
Yeah.
They're traumatized. And if you're a teacher and you're trying to figure out what's wrong with this child and why they acting out, and sometimes it's not always domestic, violence. It's not always something that's going on in the household, but sometimes it will have you to question, why is this child acting out in the classroom?
Wow.
Right.
Is something going on in the home?
Right.
And so teachers are also ones who are mandated reporters.
Okay.
So they're mandated by the law to report abuse. And sometimes you got a lot of parents who get really upset with teachers, because teachers are the main reporters of abuse.
Wow.
Because they see it, they
see
see injuries on the children,
Right.
or because the child, you got a lot of children who are very close to their teachers, and they'll go to school and say, I saw daddy punch mommy in the face.
Wow.
And so now that's not something the teacher can keep a secret.
Right. Yeah.
If the law found out that the teacher found out about abuse and did not report it, then that teacher becomes liable. That's why we have mandated. People are mandated by the law to make reports.
Wow.
One of our listeners said, unfortunately, a lot of victims are afraid to ask for help and afraid to leave.
Right.
Yeah.
Definitely. So, but in children, you'll find the behavioral, the aggression, the acting out, some of the signs of that domestic violence is going on in the house, or they're afraid, or, maybe they could be bedwetting. That could be a symptom, but there could just be a number of signs and symptoms that the child is traumatized. And a lot of times in children, because they're not able to really articulate it, it's going to show in their behavior.
Okay. Wow.
It's going to show in the behavior.
So I have a question. I was thinking about, because you said you've been doing a social work for like 20 years, right?
Yeah.
So I'm curious as to know, did the numbers go up during COVID-19 for abuse than they were before COVID started?
Ironically, I believe the numbers went down.
Wow.
I can tell you why. Because like I just said, teachers are the main reporters of abuse. And a lot of kids were going to school virtually.
Wow.
And because they were going to school virtually, a lot of them did not have those teachers or those guidance counselors that they were talking to, that they would talk to when they were in school. And so some of the calls went down.
Okay.
Wow. Some of the calls.
I heard the abuse went up though. I heard the abuse went up in the house because it's like that person lived there the whole time and they were frustrated. And I heard that more children were abused and more women were abused on COVID. But like you said, it wasn't reported. So the numbers didn't reflect what was actually going on in the home.
Okay. Exactly. And then now some of the reporters, some people who will report abuse are neighbors. Like if they hear it and they see it, then they will call it. But they'll call it in. But they're not mandated reporters. And so they're not mandated by the law. And sometimes they'll just say, I want to stay out of it. It's not my place. But then you got a lot of neighbors who will call it in. And so then when the social worker goes out to the home, they can already figure out, which neighbor called the reporting. And sometimes it's good because it helps to help stabilize that home and to prevent that abuse. Right. So I can say that a lot of times during COVID, there were some teachers and some counselors who had that virtual one-on-one with the children, where the children were reporting it. But then in a lot of cases that I personally received, there were things going on, like when I could think of about 3. And, all of this is, not sharing any names or anything. But the child was on virtually, and the child thought that they had shut the camera off, and the camera was not shut off. And so the teacher was able to witness the child being sexually abused in the background. Then I have another case where where the parent thought the child didn't realize that the child was online on his laptop in school. And the parent came and kicked the child in the stomach. That teacher called the reporter in because they witnessed it. And so that camera, and so what they were doing is sending in the video clip to the hotline, and that was a witness there. And because that was witness, that was an evidence, then we had to substantiate. There were also, other cases where it was, like kids were just kind of, the parents were leaving children home alone during COVID because they were going to work. And that there should be a certain age that certain children ought to be left alone. If they are underage, then you have to have them with a responsible adult. And so, because now you have all these Ring cameras, cameras all around in the hallway and in the building, they're seeing toddlers and kids running out of the house, running down the hallway, and come to find out there was no one in the home. Wow. And so that was evidence. And so people were still calling in, but personally, it seemed that the numbers had actually gone down.
Wow. What about daycare workers? Are they mandated as well?
Yes, daycare workers are mandated reporters, and they're some of the first ones to see abuse, especially of babies because they cannot talk. I've gotten a lot of those where babies have gone to school and they've had bruises and welt marks all over their bodies, or daycare workers are changing the baby's diapers and pampers and they're noticing that something doesn't look right. They're discharged coming out of the baby's private area and things like that. And so they are mandated reporter, and so they're calling these things into the hotline. And so yes, daycare workers are mandated reporter. We get a lot of calls from them as well. And what I try to tell parents is, because somebody cared enough about your child, they may not have all of the information, or sometimes they don't have all the information, but there are a lot of people who care about children enough to make sure that they're safe, and so they're going to call the hotline.
Right.
Oh, I wanted to talk about, like, this is really breaking my heart and stuff. Oh my Lord, what a show tonight. I know I'm just going to make this comment real quick from one of our guests, but then I wanted to shift somewhere. And she was saying there's a movie. Hey, ladies here. She said there's a movie called What Men Don't Tell. And she was talking about men and boys are abused also. How many cases have you seen where the man was abused?
Yes, I've seen, cases actually. Yeah. So, I've seen cases where the men have been abusers of domestic violence. And surprisingly, the mothers are being substantiated. And so we have to take it very serious. Yeah. And some people think that we're just trying to break up homes, but no, we're trying to stabilize homes.
Right.
And fathers are calling in the abuse, and not that they're calling the hotline. Right. Sometimes they're not calling. Sometimes the partners aren't calling the hotline or they're calling the police. It's somebody in the apartment building calling. They're calling the police and they're knocking on that door, and they're going in and they're taking reports. Yeah. And as a result of the report, we're finding out, yes, the father was the victim, and they're taking the mother, and she's being arrested and incarcerated.
Wow.
Yes.
So, Cassaundra, are there any success stories? I know you have a
This one is a success story.
Yeah. So so there are, a lot of success stories, I want to say. Because we're dealing with trauma, right? And some of the things that I'm seeing is that when children are traumatized by both mom and dad, and sometimes there are times when there has to be a removal. Right. You can't overlook it. You can't just, turn a blind eye to it. It's all about protecting these children. We can't leave them in this situation. And so I have seen family members come from everywhere to rally around these children
Wow.
and say, I want to take this child. Don't put it in foster care. Wow. Those stories right there is what I consider success stories.
Yeah.
I mean, because and sometimes what we have to do with the government, because sometimes the parent don't really want to provide the information of who the aunt or the brother or the uncle is, or provide like any resources. So the government, they have ways in order to find relatives. And so once the relatives are being found, they're able to say, yes, I want to be able to take this child. I want to care for them. I want to become a kinship provider, or I want to adopt them or do guardianship and whatever it takes to keep them out of foster care.
Wow. Yeah.
I have another question, because I was just thinking when Tish was like success stories, like with parents, like when the parents are being abusive with the kids, whatever, is that the first recourse that you take to remove the child, or do you offer counseling for the family and, you know, things like that, where they can kind of, you know, work together and work with their issues, or, you know, things that they're dealing with themselves?
Yes. So we definitely provide those resources. And that's what, you know, we tell, you know, all of our families, that we are actually here to help stabilize the family. We're here to provide resources. And sometimes when we get reports, sometimes it's just not enough evidence to say that X, Y, and Z happened. Even though we know something happened, but it's just not evidence. And sometimes, you know, you have people who become very upset with you know, the child welfare agency, because they're saying, well, why didn't you do something? And we have to have evidence, especially if it's going to go before court. There has to be evidence. And so, but basically, I mean, I want to, you know, just to, you know, answer your question. So that I want to say, So,
and have you seen that?
Your question?
Well, that would be a success story, because I was just thinking about, like, if the parents were being abusive with the children, you know, and they receive counseling, you know, did that resolve the issue or whatever?
And sometimes it does. And so, we will provide like counseling in the home, or trauma-informed therapy in the home, intensive counseling in the home. And it's not just between the mother and the child, but it's for the whole entire family. And
rehabilitation, you know, if they go to jail or something, they can be, you know, rehabilitated, and they can go back to their parents. I know you have cases like that, right?
Yes. And so we'll put all of those services in place. What we'll do is an intervention plan, and we'll have the, you know, we'll write up the intervention plan to have the parent to sign and agree to it. And we'll follow up and make sure that you're going to counseling, you're having the child to participate in counseling, because we want to make sure that this is not going to become habitual. And we want to stop these calls from coming into the hotline. And so, so we'll, you know, provide the therapy, we'll provide substance abuse counseling, whatever it takes to make sure whether it's rental assistance, because sometimes we understand that there are families that's living below poverty, and they just can't afford the food and to maintain the home. And so children are hungry, and they're going to school hungry, and parents are, you know, they just don't have the resources, and the food stamps are just not enough when you have 8 kids, and, you know, or however many kids that you have. And so we have to put those resources in place to make sure that the homes are stabilized. So we're there. I mean, even though we'll get a call about inadequate food, we can't substantiate them for having inadequate food, because they have some food in there. It's theirs, but we'll give them the services to make sure that they're able to maintain the food.
Funny that you said that. Someone said social workers also help when it's like life problems, like helping with Christmas, Thanksgiving, school supplies. It's not always abuse, but it's
not always abuse. We will provide food, resources. So, I mean, I'm going to give you a prime example. I worked with a family not too long ago, and we knew the allegation was unfounded. As soon as I got to the home, the woman said, okay, can I get a grocery voucher? Can I get a clothing voucher? Can I get some furniture? And I said, you know what? I'm glad you're not ashamed to ask, because that's why we're here. Sometimes people don't ask. I mean, and because you don't ask, you don't have. So yes, we can give you a grocery voucher. We're going to give you a clothing voucher. I mean, because we know kids are growing, they grow fast, so they're always going to need clothes and shoes. I mean, it's probably going to be somewhere to Burlington's or Walmart, but they'll have some clothes.
Yeah, absolutely.
There, we'll give them the Thanksgiving basket, the toys. We are there just to be a resource. I mean, it's not all about abuse and neglect, and like they said, it's about stabilizing the home.
That's good. That's
Thank you so much for being on our show. I've learned so much. I've learned so much tonight. Yeah. My heartstrings are aching, you know, because of the stories and everything. But this is our pet peeves segment.
I'm like, we shouldn't even do pet peeves because I'm crying and stuff. Inside. Like, I don't even know if I could do pet peeves. I don't have no pet peeves.
Well, Cassaundra has a couple of pet peeves, Mel, that she wanted to share with us.
Oh, you mean the one I gave you?
Well, no, Cassaundra, Mom. Cassaundra has.
Okay, go ahead. I thought you said Mom.
What's your pet peeve about social workers?
Oh, for social work or just in general?
In general.
Okay, well, I want to say for social work, I mean, honestly, my pet peeve is when I'm in the office and everybody's in there. So, you know, everybody's not in the office a lot now because since after the pandemic, a lot of people are working remotely. But when I'm in the office, my pet peeve is that clickety clack on the keyboard. I mean, long fingernails and it's just the typing, just the going away, the clackety. Oh my God, I gotta put my headphones on. It's just, I just.
Are you serious?
That is funny. That is so. Yeah.
Oh no. Mom, what was your pet peeve?
Oh well, it was when I, did a little bit of work there, when the people would come to the house and nobody be there, and they'd be faced with dogs,
Oh goodness.
That were babysitting animals, that were babysitting the families.
Oh,
that's terrible. So they were home by themselves with the dogs, and the dogs.
Yeah, actually, the parents say, "Well, no, they had babysitters. The dog was their babysitter."
That's ridiculous. Oh my God. That's your pet peeve, Mom?
I thought you call it that. My pet peeve is when I go to the home and there's a dog barking, and I'm afraid to go in there.
Well, let me tell you what one of my pet peeves is. When somebody takes for granted that a child is being abused and they're not really being abused, and they call DSS on that child, and then that child can be removed and nothing is even happening, in the home. That's
unnecessary trauma.
So upsetting, because I mean that has happened like in a school setting, somebody called on this one child's parent, and that wasn't even the case.
Yes, that happens a lot. A lot of times people will call the hotline because they're angry with the boyfriend or angry with the girlfriend.
Oh my goodness!
Story and call the hotline. And I'm like, it's a waste of government resources.
Yeah.
I was wondering also, and it's not, let me get rid of this pet peeve. I'm sorry. I was also wondering about, like, how if a child got upset with a parent because they didn't give them something. Any cases where a child just called make a false report?
Yes, there are false reports. A lot of times you will have the children to call the hotline and make a false report against the parent. So it happens a lot. It happens a lot.
How do you prove that? How do you prove that? Like, I mean, can't just say
Well, sometimes the hotline, they're trained workers. And so they are able to know when, something that does not need to be screened in or something needs to be screened out.
Okay.
But sometimes it's really difficult to say. And so if you're giving all of this explicit information, we have to, by law, screen it in just to go out and do a safety check. But of course, the mom and dad are very upset. And they'll tell you, and the child will say, oh, it's not true. I made that up because I was mad. So, it happens a lot.
Yeah, I know. And working, I used to work in the high school, and I lived in Indiana. And there was a student. She, had her head down, and I was asking her what's wrong, and she said her dad was in jail because she had gotten mad at him and lied and told them that he abused her.
Wow.
And I was like, what am I going to do with that? Because she lied on him because she got upset with him, and she said he is in jail. And now she's upset because her dad is not with her,
Right. Yeah. It happens a lot.
But as a teacher, should you have said something
or
put him out of jail or something like that? So it could be like an investigation.
I didn't do anything. So as a teacher, should I have done something? Cassandra.
Oh, say that again.
So as a teacher, if she told me that, should I have done something about that?
Well, definitely if a child is telling you that they're being abused, and you definitely want to take it at face value and call the report in, because I'm
saying when she confided in me that she lied on her dad
about being abused,
and now her dad is in jail.
Should she be?
Okay. Now that I would definitely consider, it's something that you would might want to call the hotline back and kind of share that information. Okay. But usually there's got to be evidence in order for a father or parent to be locked up and incarcerated.
It can't be a word of mouth, right?
Yeah.
It's just like this. One of my coworkers, her boyfriend put his hand around her neck, and she's real light, and so anything would just bruise her. And so the police came in because, like you said, that one of the neighbors called or whatever, and the police came in, and she was saying they still arrested him, even though she was like she wasn't filing charges. But they said nowadays you don't have to, file charges if they see any signs at all. They will get that person out that house. And that's the thing. Back in the day, women used to say no. That's okay.
Right. They would.
Right. But now it doesn't matter whether they say I changed my mind and stuff. The police will still get them out there and arrest them. Wow. So that's a good thing.
Yeah. And they're supposed to. They're not supposed to ask the victim, do you want me to arrest them? They're supposed to automatically. Yeah. Especially, if they are. If they see evidence that she's got a black eye or injuries, and she what happened, it's automatically.
She was like, I bruise easily. Like, so what? He had still had his hand around your neck. Like,
wow, that's crazy. Yeah. And and sometimes children say things for attention, because they're not getting attention. So they say things to get attention.
And they hurt themselves sometimes. Sometimes they scratch themselves, cut them off.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Right. That's true. So, and so we take all of that into consideration, and we do a thorough assessment. With collaterals and other witnesses, and so we're able to determine if the allegations are true or false.
Okay.
But in order for someone to be locked up and incarcerated, there's got to be evidence. And, so it's not just about word of mouth. It's sometimes if it's about, for instance, sexual abuse, there's going to be something that takes place like a forensic interview. And so these are clinical social workers who only do forensic interviewing. And so they're able to determine if the child is telling the truth or if the child is lying. And that is considered criminal evidence. And based on that report, then the police, they're able to go ask for a warrant to arrest the person. So there are a lot of things that take place, either a hospital report, there's got to be a medical, legal, and other things that are in place. And so what you'll see is sometimes children, they'll regret saying something, and they may say, you know what, I lied, but really it was the truth.
Yeah.
Okay. I see what you're saying.
Do it all the time.
They don't want to lose their
wow.
Right. Go to jail and stuff.
Right. And I have kids say that all the time. I don't want my mom or dad to go to jail. I love my mom or dad. Yeah, she's the one that gave me this black eye, but please don't arrest her.
Wow.
They say that all the time.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now I have another question in regards to, I guess, a stable home, because I know you guys do follow up, check up to see how the home is going. So how many follow-ups do you do before you just say, okay, the home is stable, is good, I don't need to follow up anymore? Or do you continue following up once a year, or so how does that work?
So if Now, if there is if the parent is being substantiated, we're definitely going to do a follow-up. But so usually the child welfare agencies has several divisions. And so Child Protective Services is only one division. And then you'll have another division, for instance, in DC, it's called in-home.
Mm-hmm.
And in-home are, cases where the parent has been substantiated, but the child doesn't have to be removed. We just need to monitor that home to make sure it doesn't happen again. But then you have the foster care division or permanency division where the child has been removed. Maybe the family had about 5 kids and only one child was removed. That social worker still has to monitor those other children that's in the home to make sure that they're not being victimized like the one that was removed.
Wow.
So we do continue to follow up, but on the CPS side, it's very fast paced. And so an investigation may only stay open for about 4 weeks. And so if it's substantiated, we'll do a closure visit, close it, and then send it to in-home.
Okay.
And then that will be an ongoing open case where they monitor at least twice, 3 times a month.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, I have a question. I have something I say about that. I did hear it was a shortage. So some cases did fall between the cracks because such a shortage that follow-ups and procedures, could not be really effective since it was a shortage.
Yes. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. So are you saying shortage?
Yeah, a shortage of
workers.
Yes. And so that's why it's a very, very stressful role. And I'm sure many of you have heard some cases where there have just been disasters where you have a social worker that has a very high caseload and they're trying to see all of their clients and maybe they missed one. For instance, like in the District of Columbia, there was a case where a mother had a call had come into the hotline where the mother had abused the children or the children had not been to school in weeks. But the social worker did not follow up in their home. By the time the social worker got to the home, all of the children were dead. And so that social worker ended up being, terminated. That supervisor was terminated in that program. So everybody was terminated. But that's because sometimes you have workers who have a very high caseload and they don't have the time to take the attention to what's going on. It is really no excuse, but sometimes it does happen. And so, you have to be on your P's and Q's at all times. And so that's why, we're racing the clock to get here, working late because we got to lay our eyes on those children. And so sometimes there'll be, homes where all of the children don't reside with the mother. You may have 1 or 2 who live with the grandmother. And so you get a call about the one that's in the home and you get to the home and say, well, okay, the mom says, okay, well, that child lives with the grandmother. So we have to ask for the phone number for that grandmother, call that grandmother and be able to go lay eyes on those children.
Wow.
Just take it at what the mom is saying. We have to witness that those other 2 children are alive and well.
Okay.
And so it's something you take very seriously. You might think that it's not, all that important, but it is. I mean, if they're not all in the home, you want to be sure and ask yourself, where are they at?
Right.
Because they don't want to tell us. And then that's where we gotta, unfortunately get in their business, find phone numbers of every relative in the family, because we have the resources to do that. Call every number until we find that child and make sure that that other child is alive and well.
Wow. So there's one more question before we go. I know we got 1 more minute.
I know. Can I say one more thing? Can we say hi to Gabe?
Okay.
Hi, Gabe.
Hi, Gabe. Hi, Gabe.
So you got so much stuff on you. So how do you relax after all of this stuff? How do you relieve all of this stress and
Jesus?
Yes.
What do you do? What do you do?
I want to say Jesus. That's at the top of the list. I mean, I'm praying throughout the day. And I asked myself, one time, I don't know how these other social workers do it without Jesus. I mean, I gotta have me some Jesus on this job. I mean, I'm praying going into the house and I'm praying coming out. I mean, I done been into some homes where I done seen blood scattered all on the wall, all on the floor, all on the doorknob. I done seen some traumatic situation. I done been threatened. And my life has been put at risk. I done been grabbed. I done been manhandled. And so I'm praying if I feel like I got Jesus, but I'm calling the police for some backup.
Right.
I don't have no problem saying, okay, I need the police to go escort me into the house because you got too many social workers being killed. I mean, it's not news.
That's another show.
Are being killed or whatever as a result. So I got Jesus. And on top of that, I garden. I love my garden. I got a place.
That's your happy place.
Flowers, and I gotta, be able to walk around in the garden and be around something beautiful, some art crafts, so something, taking a walk. I mean, some time off and
Cassaundra, thank you so much for being on.
Yes.
Oh my goodness, I hate that we don't have enough time.
Yeah,
that's right.
We have to definitely bring you back.
Yeah, thank you.
We love you. I love what you're doing. I love your heart.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I just pray that God will just continue to strengthen you.
Yeah.
I just love you, period. I love you, period.
So we will talk to y'all later. Thank y'all so much for chilling with the girls. Like and share this video with your friends. Take care. Good night. Have a great weekend.
Have a great weekend.